This is gonna be awesome. Hey everybody, it's Ryan. Welcome to my channel. I'm a former F-15E combat fighter pilot and F-16 Thunderbird demonstration pilot. I've also got time in Boeing and Airbus aircraft, and I use my experience to break down awesome aviation footage and stories. And this video is going to be one for the record books because we're going to pin head-to-head the SU-57 Felon versus the F-22 Raptor. And stay to the very end of the video because at the end, I'm going to give you my opinion on which one I think is more lethal. Before we get going, if you would, just dominate that like button for me and maybe even subscribe. That would just help me grow this channel and it'll help me put this video in front of more people, and I would greatly appreciate it. I'm so glad that you're here and that you're a part of the BJet Clean team. Let's dive in. Right at the beginning, my thoughts on the Su-57, its designation is the Felon, which is awesome because some of the other Russian jets got NATO call signs like Fulcrum, Foxbat, Frogfoot, Flanker. They're okay, but Felon, I mean, that's a cool designation. So I think that's a surprise win right there. But off the bat, I'm looking at the skin of this Su-57 and I see like a pitot tube sticking out, which is just a fancy way of saying something that measures the airspeed. And then there's some rivets that are sticking out as well, and some other little things that to me might affect its ability to be stealthy, because with stealth you want things completely smooth so that the waves of radar just kind of slide right across it and don't see it as an object the same size as it is. Maybe you would want it to see this plane as something that's like the size of a bird, something really, really small. But the more things you have sticking off of it, the less stealthy it's gonna be. And there you can see it has a canopy bow as well. And again, this is just one more thing to kind of catch that radar and just make it show up as a little bit bigger than it really is. And also it's gonna reduce the visibility. And I want you to look right now at the cockpit and you can kind of see that the ejection seat is right up against kind of the way that the metal forms around the back of the canopy. And so the rearward visibility in this thing, being able to look directly behind you, is gonna be affected by that. It's got a really cool paint job though. I mean, that digital camo to me is awesome. I really dig that. It's interesting to me that he's lining up for takeoff now and his flaps are up. So I don't know if that's the way that these things are supposed to take off, hopefully, but maybe there's something to do with like the thrust vectoring and how it angles down. It doesn't need the flaps down, but in any of the other fighters I've flown, we've always taken off with flaps to just help you generate lift. Okay, right there you could kind of see one of its tails like flex, like it went really far. So the planes I'm used to flying, they have a little portion of the tail. It's called the vertical stabilizer. It goes straight up in the back. There's two of them. There's a portion of that that would move to kind of help you kind of start to move. But this time the whole thing went like and flexed, which is like crazy to see, but really cool. It reminds me of like a sports car or something. Like some sports cars will like lean into turns. They're like engineered so that when you just start turning, they like kind of compress down on one side. That's what that kind of reminded me of. That looked really cool. Okay, so they're showing the unmanned aircraft there, and a big thing with these stealth aircraft, these next generation aircraft, is they need to be interoperable with other platforms because you're kind of a big sensor up in the sky that's controlling a lot of different things. So Sukhoi right here is showing like, hey, this thing interacts and operates with unmanned aircraft. Cool. So this is the back of the engine right here, and what those things are called turkey feathers. And on the F-15E, funny story, we had those things for a while, but for whatever reason, the way that they would flex and bend with that airframe, they were getting thrown off. So you'd like go into afterburner and it'd be like, Those things just like went flying. So they stopped putting them on there. But what they do is they reduce the heat signature of the engine. So these look like they're integrated pretty well into it. But again, it seems to me a little bit like a conventional engine, not necessarily a stealth engine. And I'm just wondering, you know, from the back or the side, if these things are really going to generate a large radar cross section. That thing that I told you about earlier that just kind of shows up on your radar, the size of what that airplane may be. So this might make it look a little bigger than it needs to look, but you know, not 100% sure. All right, so it showed the thrust vectoring there, and this is one of the things that Sukhoi sold to the Russians is like, hey, this is gonna be an advanced version of the F-22 because it came out after the F-22, and obviously Sukhoi wants to say, hey, we've taken some of the things that the F-22 lacks and we've added to it, so you should definitely buy this. And one of those is the different type of thrust vectoring. So as you can see there, that thrust vectoring is moving side to side, which is in yaw, and then roll. So it's moving in different axes, whereas the F-22 is just mainly focused on up and down, which is pitch. So they're saying that this makes it more maneuverable, and we'll actually see some of that footage here in a second. So it just makes it a little bit different than the F-22. So right there, you kind of saw it spinning on that axis that I told you about in the yaw. So it's saying that it can use thrust vectoring to do that. Now, obviously you can use control surfaces to do that as well because the Raptor can move like that by using control surfaces, but they're saying that it's more effective for it to be intertwined into the thrust vectoring. But for me, like my thoughts are, wow, that might affect the maintenance and make it a lot harder to maintain while it is really cool. And let's be honest, you know, what matters? It's being cool. Okay, so there's the hype video for the Su-57. Now I'm just gonna give you a few quick facts on things that I want you to think about that plane. Supposedly it has a bigger weapons bay than the F-22. And then also with the thrust vectoring I told you about, apparently it doesn't rely on thrust vectoring to recover from stalls. And that was another selling point that Sukhoi used when making this jet. They also claim it can do the Cobra maneuver, which if you've seen Top Gun 1, that's when he says, slam down the brakes and we'll fly right by. So it's essentially when you turn, if this was the Su-57, they're saying that it can turn essentially into a speed brake and stall instantaneously, basically, and then pop behind another jet and be in a position to shoot it down. So those are a few details on the Su-57. We'll get a little bit more on that in a little bit, but now let's watch the F-22 hype video. I like how they started off like with the muffled like radio call. It's like it sounds kind of cool, but that's honestly how it would sound like if someone was like flying with their mask down and you couldn't hear them because there's a lot of wind inside the cockpit from the vents and stuff. So it's like totally like hard to hear anybody. It kind of reminded me of that, but it does sound kind of cool.
Raptor demo, ready for takeoff. Unrestricted climb to 15,000 feet approved.
All right, so unrestricted climbs are definitely the best takeoffs to do ever. I mean, it's just so much fun. And being able to do that consistently, like the F-22 demo team gets to do, and how I was fortunate enough to be able to do things like that on the Thunderbirds, I mean, just incredible. And it's awesome to be able to just kind of feel the max performance of that aircraft on a lot of different flights, because sometimes when you're flying combat jets, you don't do that quite as often, so you don't really get the feel of that max performance as often. Okay, so I talked about rearward visibility in the Su-57. Now look at the rearward visibility in the F-22. Like, it's crystal clear looking behind you. And in my opinion, just being able to turn around and look and see what's going on if you need to, whether it's a dogfight or you're just managing a bunch of different aircrafts, being able to see certain things and then apply it to what you're seeing in front of you on your scopes is a huge advantage. Check out the paint job on that F-22. I mean, to me, it looks like something that was like, I don't know, built experimentally, and they're like, hey, it's not quite done yet. Take it out there. Let's launch this thing. But it looks super cool at the same time. So they're showing the weapons bay of the F-22, and another thing that Sukhoi claimed was they made the weapons bay of the Su-57 bigger, again, kind of showing like, hey, the F-22 came out, now we're going to give you like an upgrade of that and make the weapons bay bigger on the Su-57. And there you can see the back end, you can see the engines on the F-22, and I'm thinking that they're just a little more stealthy the way they're built. They don't look quite like the conventional fighter jet engines on the Su-57. He's coming back in and he's giving a shout to the crowd. He's just kind of chill about it. He's like, yeah, what's up, what's up? I feel like if I was flying the F-22, I'd be so excited. I'd be like, 22, what up, 22? And then I like how they brought in a human element there at the end. So there we go, that finishes up the F-22 hype video. Now let's break down a little bit more of the differences between the Su-57 and the F-22. So when it comes to the engines, the Su-57 has 33,000 pounds a piece for a 66,000 pounds of thrust total. Now, I went ahead and broke this down, and it's actually 88,000 horsepower, and they have an emergency mode, which is essentially like the ludicrous mode in a Tesla that you flip it and it'll give you like 2,000 extra pounds of thrust. And then comparing that to the F-22 has 35,000 pounds of thrust per engine for a total of 70,000 pounds of thrust, and that brings it to a total of 93,300 horsepower. And I computed that at a jet moving at 500 miles an hour. So it's a lot of horses. One other major difference is the location of the stick. And those of you that have watched this channel for a while, you know that I've flown the F-15E, which has a center stick, and the F-16, which has a side stick. The Su-57 has a center stick, and the F-22 has a side stick. I think it's a huge advantage to have a side stick because there's information that's presented in front of you. And if you have a stick sitting there the whole time, sometimes you have to look over it to see it. And it's just kind of cumbersome. So I would much prefer the side stick. Even when flying commercial aircraft, in a Boeing aircraft, you have this big yoke in front of you and it's blocking some of the screens and you have to like pull yourself forward and look. But in the Airbus, you have a side stick. So you're able to kind of see the screens and be unencumbered so you can focus more on the different sensors that you're using. So which one would I rather fly? Well, if I pulled up to a hangar and they were both sitting in there, man, I'd probably choose the Su-57 just because it's so different and so unique and unlike anything I'd probably ever have the chance to fly again. So I would just want to test it out. So I'd jump in it and do that. Now, when it comes to which one I think is the most lethal, I'm going to say F-22, and the reason why is because I got to interact with a lot of F-22 pilots and maintenance crews, and I kind of saw the way that they operated, and they definitely treat the aircraft like a sensor, and they're very focused on integrating it with lots of different aircraft across the spectrum of capabilities. And I think in the US, we're given some leeway to be creative in the way that we operate our fighter jets. And I'll tell you a story about that. So I was flying the F-15E, and I was essentially given the keys to a two-ship, and my boss said, hey, have it back in 3 hours. I was like, awesome. So what we ended up doing is a mission that we wouldn't typically do. So we went out and we were strafing. So we were shooting the gun, and we set up a scenario where an enemy fighter jet would come in and we would lock that aircraft as we were coming off of our gun run. And that's not something you would normally do. So we did a couple, so I didn't know exactly when it was gonna happen. And then sure enough, I locked up an enemy fighter, simulating I was doing some sort of close air support scenario, and then there was a jet coming in trying to attack us. So what went through my mind was like, okay, I'm down really low. This jet's up really high. So if they see me, I'm at such a disadvantage, it really doesn't matter. So I'm gonna hope that they don't, and I'm gonna use some support to try to get behind this jet and cover my six. So what I did is I stayed really, really low, and luckily they didn't see me, and I was able to pull up behind them with full afterburner and do a simulated shoot down of that aircraft. But I was able to think so creatively and put myself in a different space than what you would probably get if you only had a few hours to fly these fighter jets each year, which I think maybe in the SU-57, there's not a lot of budget. There's actually not a lot of them out there. You know, maybe at most like 6 or 7 of these things that are actually operational, maybe even less. But the more flight hours you have, the more comfortable you get with your aircraft. I mean, think about it like a basketball team. If your basketball team only practices, once a month, you're not going to be great. But if you're practicing 5-6 times a week, you're going to be really good, and you're going to be able to crush the competition. So I hope you guys got a lot out of that video. If you wouldn't mind, hey, go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe, and maybe check out some of my other videos that might pop up around here. So thanks so much for being here, guys. So glad to have you as a member of the BJet Clean team. We'll see you on the next video.